Anyway, I'm going to hand over to Dan because Dan wants to. I know Dan wants to tell you that he's actually just produced a brand new book, which I think is arriving within the next couple of days. So go ahead, Dan, and let them know what you do.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for virtually inviting me. And I'll have to apologize if my voice is sounding a little bit husky. Had a bit of a late night last night with David, actually, as we went to an event in Leicester in the UK. I think I left my voice in a restaurant in Leicester. But yeah, thank you very much. I've heard that you guys are actually the longest continually operating Commodore users club in the world. And as someone who's been a lifelong fan of Commodore computers since I was what, 5, 6, 7 years old, a long time. And it's just an honor to be virtually invited to your event, and hopefully I can make it out there in person one day as well. David said what an incredible event it was last year. But for those who aren't familiar with me, I'm basically just a fan of Commodore and the Amiga in particular as well, even though I love the 8-bit systems. From the UK. I live in Nottingham in the UK now, and I've covered Commodore and Amiga computers and software on my YouTube channel. My name's Dan Wood. You can find me on YouTube since I've been doing YouTube quite a long time now, since around 2007. I think I started uploading videos originally on Google Video, if anyone remembers that. And then I moved over to YouTube in around 2009. I also produce a weekly retro gaming and technology podcast, again, covering a lot of Commodore products on there as well. Called the Retro Hour that you can find wherever you normally get your podcast from. And as David mentioned, we actually did our first book. We ran a Kickstarter on that about a year ago as now. And the books have actually just been printed. So they're going to be delivered to me this week, which is very exciting news. Yeah, thank you for having me here.
Can't wait to get my copy.
Well, at the moment, we did a Kickstarter, so it's going out to the backers first. Want to make sure that all the backers' orders are fulfilled. And then after that, we're going to have some ebooks available and any kind of remaining stock that hasn't gone to the Kickstarters on our website, which is theretrohour.com. So best place to get it is just to keep an eye on that website.
Oh no, I backed it. I
Oh, you
totally backed
did? Oh, wonderful.
it.
Fantastic.
Oh yeah, I was never gonna. There was no way I was gonna wait on that.
Oh, awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sounds exciting.
Hope you love it as much as we do.
I'm certain, no question in my mind.
Yeah, actually, going back to my point about those people who paid me up front, what I could do, of course, and probably the best thing to do, is if people who paid me some money last December, I can send them Volume 2 and Volume 3 ebooks, which they'll get instantaneously. That makes a lot more sense, I think, than me trying to send hardback books. And it's certainly the quickest way of fulfilling those things. Which actually brings me on to my topic, because I've decided to write another book, believe it or not, which is really bizarre because when I was sort of coerced into writing the first book, I was very reluctant to do so and never believed I could write a book. And now I've got 4 published. Um, Actually, the inside story has just recently been released in the German language. It's currently being translated into Polish. And I've just signed an agreement with a museum and university in Argentina. They're going to do all 4 books in Latin Spanish. So that's pretty exciting, really. But yeah, I've just decided I want to write another book. I think there is one more in me. And this book will be about what would have happened if Colin Proudfoot, who was my co-MD at Commodore UK, if he and I had not been cheated out of our management buyout bid for the whole of the worldwide assets of Commodore, what we would have done, how we would have restructured the whole company, how we would have treated the product range, how we would have licensed the trademark and logos and things. And of course, with the benefit of hindsight, after 38 years, we now know all the new technologies that were being developed. And because our mandate was always going to be to collaborate with everybody who's producing anything that's of value to the community, what we would have done with that technology. So I think it's going to be a pretty exciting book, actually. I'm working with Dave Haney, and that's quite interesting because Dave was the guy that I had already told that if we had been successful in the management buyout, he would have been appointed our head of engineering. And so I contacted him a couple of weeks ago, just on Facebook, and said, Dave, I want to write a book about what we would have done and how we would have utilized the new technologies. Um, I need your help. Are you in? And like within 30 seconds, he gets the message back, I'm in straight away. So it should be quite an interesting book, I think. Uh, and obviously, what we'll do is we will invite people who we know who are good technologically to suggest what could have happened, what might happen, and take it from there. So I'll be starting that actually probably the end of next week because I'm again traveling away from the UK for Christmas. I'm going back to Miami where I like the warm weather, and I will be working on it from there. So I think that's a pretty interesting topic. I'll probably be doing a Kickstarter for it because I don't really want to spend a massive amount of time writing a book that nobody wants. So I need to be sure that there is a demand for it. All I can say is that every single person I've asked so far has said absolutely yes, it's a good idea. Hopefully you guys agree. Is there any response? What do you
Sounds
think?
great. Great work.
Yeah, what do you think of the idea? It's a what should have, what could have been.
I'm certainly curious as to the plan on exactly how you guys are structured.
Well, if you remember that way back 94, 95, we employed Coopers and Lybrand, and between them and we raised $50 million, which was a lot of
Nice.
money then, and that was because on the strength of the business plan that we put together. So uh, yeah, I think people will find it quite interesting, and some quite novel ideas we had about what we were going to do. And of course, the other thing is that nobody from ESCOM who ultimately bought all the assets, they never checked out the technology that Commodore was working on. It was a project which is called Ombre, and it was the most advanced technological that I've ever seen. And I've not seen anything on the market I think even comes close to what it could do. They never even looked at it. So that sort of says a lot, I think.
No kidding.
So anyway, does anybody want to ask any questions? Because that's really what we're here for.
What inspired you to embark on the original project?
On the original, what?
On the original project?
Uh, yeah, what happened was that after our management buyout failed, because we had one of our investors stolen away from us by Escom, which meant that we didn't have sufficient money to run the business for the period of time it would have taken us to be self-financed and not needing credit, because clearly all of the suppliers to Commodore had just been burned very badly, and none of them would have given us credit terms. Um, so after that, I just left the industry completely. I was just completely away from it. I changed my life in every single possible way. And it wasn't until 2015 when I got invited to the Amiga 30th anniversary celebration in Amsterdam. And when I walked into that room, I was amazed at how many people um, wanted my autograph and wanted the selfie and so on and so forth. I had no idea that I was held in that much regard. And anyway, I used to tell stories about what happened, and everybody kept saying to me, "Write a book, write a book, write a book." And I said, "Look, I'm not an author. I don't know what to do." But ultimately, I acceded to their requests, and I wrote the Commodore the Inside Story. And when I'd finished my part, I didn't like what I'd read. It was more a story about David Pleasance than it was about Commodore. But then I thought to myself, well, actually, it can't really be anything else because it's through my ears and my eyes. However, I wanted to give a much more succinct image of what happened to Commodore. So I invited chapters from many people from within Commodore, like Dave Haney, engineer, like Beth Richard, engineer, like Peter Kittle, Dr. Peter Kittle in Commodore Germany. There's chapters, R.J. Michael, of course, wrote a chapter. And so ultimately the book became a very good reference and the only true story, because there's been several books written about Commodore, but from people outside the company, we didn't really know what went on. And it is true that the inside story has been a very successful seller. I'm very pleased with the book. And as I said, it's still being translated into other languages now. But that's how I began that project. And then what happened is I decided to investigate what had happened to Commodore's trademarks and logos and IPs and patents after their bankruptcy. And I contacted a few people, including Trevor Dickinson, and Trevor got back to me immediately and said, look, I've got a lot of information already. I've done some research. How about we co-author the book? So we came up with I came up with the concept of the book being called From Vultures to Vampires, because we believed it was going to be one book, and it would tell the story of all the vultures who came scavenging bits from the remnants of Commodore, and then the technology that was latest at that time was the vampire thought that had just been released. So the name Vultures to Vampires really made good sense. What we didn't realize was that there was actually 3 books worth of material. So it's volume 1, 2, and 3, which have all now been released and are available.
I will say, as well, as someone who kind of tried to follow that saga when it was ongoing, you know, the Amiga moving to ESCOM and then Gateway and all these other companies like Viscorp who were, you know, briefly in the picture back in the day. I think reading those books as well, it really gave me a good overview of what exactly happened, because it was such, you know, even for someone that was following it when it happened by the magazines and, you know, the early internet, it was still just like such a complicated story. So I think having it all laid out, you know, like you said, it's such a long story that it needs 3 books, but I think it does give you a really good overview of exactly what happened.
Thank you. That was amazing. Oh my God, what a journey.
Mm.
Yeah, I think the best way to sum it up is there's 4 years of research covering almost 40 years of Commodore history. It's certainly incredible material. Anybody who's interested in the story of Commodore, it's a definite must read, no question about it. Because there's companies that got involved and their own infighting caused the demise of whatever it was they were producing. But some of the technology that they were producing, especially from around the Amiga core technology, absolutely amazing. But nothing ever got to market.
Kidding. Thank you so much.
So, Dan, why don't you give an overview of your book about the retro podcast? Because
Yeah, so well, the book is basically because you know, we started the podcast in 2016, so you know, coming up to our 8th birthday in a couple of weeks' time. And the idea of the podcast, for those that haven't heard it, is it's kind of a show of 2 halves, really. The first half of the podcast is that we bring you up to speed on what's been happening in the world of retro from over the last week. So we talk about the news headlines, and then the second half of the podcast is really the original idea is to get people on who made the video games and the systems that we grew up playing, people that ran the companies, you know, graphic artists, musicians. So really people that, you know, we remember hearing their names in magazines back in the day or on the back of game boxes, but really want to capture as many stories as we could on the podcast from the people who actually shaped the industry. And we are now at around, I think, 410 episodes we've recorded now. Every single episode has an interview with someone as well. Many of them from, you know, people that worked in the industry back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s in particular. And, you know, we've had some absolute legends on there. You know, people like Nolan Bushnell's been on the podcast. We've had Lord British on there as well. Obviously, David's been on. A lot of guys from Commodore. Dave Haney's been on as well. R.J. Michael. And the idea was that we wanted to kind of, because obviously you release a podcast and it's uploaded to a server somewhere in the world, but these things are not going to be online forever. I mean, hopefully, you know, in 50 to 100 years or whatever, someone will have archived the audio and it will be available somewhere. But the idea was that we wanted to put it down on paper to kind of make this more of a tangible thing, you know. So the idea is that we picked 10 of our favorite interviews that we've done, which, you know, like I said, from over 400 was really difficult to choose, and put those together into a book. And then that was kind of the main idea of the book, but also it kind of grew a bit beyond that. So we had a few stretch goals on Kickstarter to do. We've actually got 5 extra interviews in there now that are exclusive to the book, and we've written a load of features that go between every interview in the book as well. So yeah, it's kind of expanded quite a lot beyond the original vision. But also, I mean, when you're doing a book, and I'm sure David will agree with me here as well, you want to make it visually enticing. So, you know, we've actually paid a lot of photographers and, you know, indie photographers, and licensed a lot of images as well to kind of bring a whole new dimension to the book. I think the book currently stands at around 415 pages, and pretty much every page has got at least one picture on it. So yeah, it's just a way of really having something physical to celebrate all these interviews that we've done on the show.
Tell them how the Kickstarter went. You did very well, didn't you?
Yeah, really well on Kickstarter. I mean, I've got a feeling we raised about £36,000, which blew our expectations, you know, completely out of the water. Obviously, a lot of that kind of goes back into printing and everything in the last 12 months. I'm sure, as everyone is aware, as kind of doubled in price in terms of, you know, sending things around the world, and even, you know, the cost of paper and ink. But that wasn't the reason we did it. I mean, you know, just the fact that we've actually, you know, got something that, you know, people have supported in the community, and, you know, the fact that it's meant so much to people that they've actually found it in their hearts to pay out for a book, and, you know, looking forward to having that in their collection, I think is awesome. And being a published author is pretty cool as well, as I'm sure David will agree.
Yeah, it's getting your first book physically in your hands. It's a bit like having your first child or something.
Yeah.
It's amazing feeling, really good.
Well, ours are on a pallet in Germany at the moment, waiting to be delivered this week. So yeah, I'll hopefully get that feeling this week.
Especially when you put so much effort into it. You know?
Yeah, like a year's worth of work's got into it. So yeah, it's going to be nice to finally hold it in my hand.
Yeah, indeed. So, where can the guys get hold of it then? I mean, obviously, Ennio said he's backed it, but
yeah,
if he wants to get it, how do they best go about it?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to fulfill obviously all the Kickstarter orders first. We did get about an extra 500 printed on top of that. So obviously kind of allowing for any that go missing in the mail, or any damaged ones that need replacing. Obviously, you always have to kind of account for that as well. But hopefully after that, we're going to make them available on our website, theretrohour.com. And the ebooks will be for sale on there as well in the new year.
Somebody's basement is going to be full for a few weeks.
Yeah, so we're getting the books delivered this week. The ones that are going to the rest of the world, apart from the UK, are being sent out from Germany, so they should be going out this week. Obviously, we're kind of hitting the Christmas mailing period, so, you know, depending on how quickly they can get them delivered. But yeah, I think the ones from Germany are being sent out by the end of this week, so hopefully it won't be too long until they're with you.
Yeah, I had to do exactly the same thing, because by the time Volume 1 was printed of my trilogy, we had left the EU, and I didn't even take that into account, and I shipped a whole lot of books all over the world from the UK, and it was an absolute nightmare, because all the customs officers wanted to charge duty to the recipient, but really didn't quite know how to handle it. So what they should have done is the post office in each country should have just put a note to the person's door saying, you owe a certain amount of money in customs duty, so come in and pay it, and then you can collect your book or collect your parcel. But a lot of them didn't do that. So ultimately, after sitting on them for several weeks, they just returned the sender, which, you know, it's a very expensive exercise anyway. If that wasn't bad enough, their return to sender sticker was always placed right on top of the address to whom the book had been sent to. And when you peel that off, you can't see the name and address of the person who sent the book to. So you don't know where, you know, who it's from. It was a nightmare. So I then got in touch with a company in Germany, who is the same company that Dan's using, and they've shipped out all my volume 2s and volume 3s, other than the ones that are coming to the UK. And it's a very good way of doing it. Also, it's a little bit cheaper. I mean, I'll give you an example. To send one book from the UK to, say, the USA, it's £18 and 40 pence just for one book, because the book's over a kilo. And I think from Germany it's £13. So it's a big saving to the end user.
Yeah, when you're sending like 1,000 books or something as well. Yeah, that's
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was horrific, but I won't ever do that again. What we did with Volume 1, it's so much of a nightmare.
Yeah, and the guy that's made actually printed the books, a guy called Nico, who he's a big Amiga fan as well. I think we first met him at the Amiga show in Germany, didn't we? Amiga 37 a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. And we should tell everybody that we were at a big event yesterday, actually, which is why we were celebrating in a restaurant last night. And there's a great museum, the Retro Computer Museum in Leicester, which is about an hour and 10 minutes from where I live, and about 40 minutes from where Dan lives. And they had a big open day yesterday, and they made an announcement that they're actually moving to premises more than double the size, because the museum is phenomenal. It's got everything in it. They have, in fact, the only known example of the CD 1200 that was going to be produced by Beth Richard, the engineer, to allow the 1200 to be turned into CD 32, but it never got made because obviously Commodore went bankrupt before that was ever released. But the only known example of it is in the museum at Leicester. Which is pretty amazing. They've got some fabulous stuff there, and really great
Yeah,
stuff.
it's worth the trip just to see the CD 1200, I think, because I remember reading about that in Amiga format, back in the 90s, and I remember it graced the cover of lots of Amiga magazines around the world. Then obviously the bankruptcy happened just before it was about to be released. So I think actually finally seeing that in person, it's an interesting story as well, because Andy, the curator of the museum, he actually found it in a barn, didn't he? It had been completely abandoned, and he had no idea what it was at first.
Yeah, I can put some meat on that sandwich actually, because there was a company in Leicester called the Cavendish Commodore Centre, and they were the very first retailer that I met when I joined Commodore. And actually, we became very good friends. And I actually had a big argument with them because they only sold Commodore products. And I had this big argument with them that it doesn't make a lot of sense to only sell one brand, especially if something goes wrong, which ultimately, of course, it did. But somehow or other, they got hold of a sample.
Within reach.
Yeah. Somehow or other, they got hold of a pre-production model, of which I think there were originally only 9. And anyway, I managed to get Beth Richard to come over to the UK, and whilst I wasn't able to go myself, she went to that museum and looked at the whole thing, and looked and talked about, possibly building one or two or whatever. I also got Beth to the Amiga 38 event last October in Germany. They actually flew her over, and she was a guest there. Great engineer, and very knowledgeable. It's amazing, the things that people keep finding. I actually have I had the 1 millionth Amiga in my offices in the UK. It was painted gold, and anyway, I ended up. I auctioned it off. I can't exactly remember. Anyway, the guy who ended up getting it has donated it to that museum, so they've got that in that museum as well, which is really nice.
Yeah, and they're actually moving to a bigger premises now as well, aren't they? Because it's that popular.
Yeah, they've
which
got
is awesome. Yeah.
double the size, which they've literally just got. They got an anonymous donation of a large amount of money, which obviously they've used to take on a bigger size premises. In fact, they showed that to me this morning.
Nice. Yes, if you're ever in the UK and you want, it's worth a visit. I mean, Leicester's only about, an hour and a half from London on the train, I think. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely worth a trip.
Indeed.
Any other questions from anyone?
Yeah. If that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Fire away.
Thank you so much. Is it going to come out on like Kindle or equivalent by any chance, please, as well?
Yeah, we've had a few people ask about that actually. Because I mean, we do have an ebook version of my book at the moment in its PDF format, and there have been a few members of our community in Discord who've kind of been playing around with making them work on Kindles, because obviously Kindles use, generally their own Mobi format, I think it is, isn't it? And they can load EPUB files as well. Like I said, the book is quite visual, but I think we could maybe do a version. I'm maybe thinking of doing a version that's basically just text only for Kindles. So yeah, that's definitely something we're looking at now.
All my
Brilliant.
4 books are available in all 3
Yeah,
formats.
yeah, yours are, yeah.
So, and actually, the guy that did it for me, I can put you onto him because
Okay.
he was very inexpensive and did a good job.
Mm.
So I'll put him onto you because it's a lot of people prefer the ebooks of some form.
Yeah, it's easier on the eyes, isn't it, than reading it off an iPad or something.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah,
And
I do find e-ink format a little easier on my eyeballs, for sure.
Yeah.
Also got a books tablet, which
Mm.
is larger format, but also runs Android, so I installed a Kindle app on that and have a bigger format as well.
Oh, nice.
I can almost open an entire page at a time, like
Yeah.
a 10 page.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth us doing, actually. Yeah, that's a good shout.
yeah, I should mention too that the Inside Story is available as an audio book, which Dan actually recorded.
Hmm.
Obviously, Dan being a professional radio DJ, he's got a great voice for it. Not with the
Normally, not today.
totes, no,
Yeah.
but and that's 8.25 hours of audio. We'll be putting that on Audible in the next couple of days because we keep being asked for it to be on Audible, so we're going to do that. And it's also just about finished the audiobook of Volume 1. So that
Vultures to Vampires.
yeah, but
Yeah.
that'll be available again probably within the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
He's been promising it for a long time.
Yeah. We're nearly there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think audiobooks are a nice way to listen as well, though, because I listen to a lot of audiobooks, I think, because you can kind of read a book while you're doing something else, which I think is quite nice. When you're driving or just on your AirPods while you're tidying the house or whatever, I think it's quite a good way to consume books, I think.
Do you tidy that?
Oh,
Thank you.
occasionally, yeah.
Yeah, especially when they're read by the original author. Prime
Yeah.
material.
I have to get David to do his next two.
I didn't know about that. I've got the voice for radio that you've got. That's for sure. Although I tell good stories.
You do.
Thank you.
So, anything else anybody wants to ask us?
Oh, what's next for the podcast, actually? What do you guys got planned coming up?
Well, we had our 400th episode celebrations a couple of months ago now. That was in October. So we literally just before I jumped on here, I've recorded our annual Christmas quiz episode, which we do every year. And this is always a bit of a Christmas tradition on the podcast where we just basically break the format completely, just have a bit of fun really, and challenge each other to a bit of retro trivia. So I won't spoil it by saying who won this year, but you can check that episode out. In that'll be our final one of the year. So the week before Christmas, I think it's like 22nd or something. It drops. So that's basically, we've then we're also doing like a best of episode as well, where we can look back on our favorite bits of the podcast in 2023. And then we're just getting at the moment, it's all about just kind of getting a load of guests lined up for January now and getting those recorded over the next few weeks. So and we have actually got some plans. We've been trying out doing a video element to the podcast as well, because it kind of feels like the whole podcast industry is moving in that direction. I must admit, I've got a radio background, So I'm definitely more about the audio side of it. I mean, I consume podcasts on my phone using my AirPods normally. But I know the industry is definitely moving towards a more visual side of it. So that's kind of one of our aims in 2024 to upload an actual video version of it on YouTube as well. It's just kind of getting the logistics of that sorted out and kind of seeing how much extra work it's going to be because, I can edit an audio episode in an afternoon, but a video version, I imagine, is going to be quite a bit more work. But yeah, that's definitely something we want to do in the new year.
For what it's worth, if it may be some consolation, it seems that there's some YouTubers that are going back to the podcasting because it takes less bandwidth.
Yeah, that's it. That's 100%. I mean, we did a video episode for our 300th a couple of years ago, and for example, a normal episode of the podcast might take me anywhere from maybe 3 to 6 hours to edit the audio, and doing the video version of that took me around 15 hours in total. So it was a lot more work.
Wow.
I mean, that was quite a complicated episode because we had a lot of guests on, but yeah, it's definitely you could probably at least double the time needed each week. So yeah, we're just kind of sorting out how we're going to do that, but it's definitely something we want to do.
No kidding.
So what do you do, Jennifer?
Sorry?
What do you do?
Um, I'm retired right now. But I've always had a strong interest in computer hardware since I was a kid. So just through my general kind of life, ebbing and flowing, it's how I ended up in these circles.
Did you start with Commodore computers?
I actually did. I was born in the 80s, so like in the early 80s. Well, just before, but anyways, um, yeah. So I grew up right when Commodore kind of hit the floor running and got into schools and stuff. So I when I was in like grade 1 and 2 and stuff, um, they had them in our classrooms, and they were basically one of the first computers that I ever learned on. So that's where I got my experience with them way back then. And then ever since I got into like high school and stuff, and I got into public school and all that kind of thing. Um, everybody transitioned kind of away from those, and the industry just grew so far apart. And it wasn't until very recently as I got back into the community that I was able to reconnect with my roots in the in the Commodore sphere. So
What was your first machine then? Was that a 64?
well, yeah, that was one
Yeah.
of the ones that we had in our classrooms.
Mm,
The other one that we had in our classrooms was, I think, a Mac Classic or something.
nice.
Um, yeah, so that was the other one we had in one of our other classrooms.
Yeah, I
That
wasn't
was one.
fortunate enough to grow up with a 64. I've told David before my first machine was it was a Commodore Plus 4, which I'm not sure
Nice.
if they were released over in Canada. If not, you didn't miss out on much.
Yeah, I was just a baby, so we might have had those and I just didn't know, but I'm pretty sure we must have had at least like a few like Commodore 64s in our midst. So
Yeah, the
We
Plus
did
4 wasn't on the market for very long.
we did
no
have
doubt.
we did have the +4 here at the show.
You did?
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, I
should
mean,
mention now, by the way, I just remembered that by complete fluke, Dan and I are both on Thursday. We're going to be recording it for the BBC Radio. They have a program, a documentary program on radio called Toast, and it what it does is it examines what happened to either a company or a brand that was very, very high and very famous, and then now no longer in existence, hence the name Toast. And anyway, yeah, anyway, they contacted me a couple of weeks ago and said that we want to do an episode on the Commodore 64. And they said, have you got half an hour on the phone just to talk about it? And an hour and a half later, we finished talking about it. And anyway, they're recording the program on Thursday. And in the meantime, one of the producer's assistants got in touch with Dan,
yeah.
completely as a fluke, because as Dan said, his first Commodore was not a 64; it was a plus four.
Mm.
So I would have thought that was kind of not that relevant. But anyway, Dan's got such a good reputation. And anyway, the assistant got in touch with him, and he's now on the same program, which is lovely, really. So it was a complete and a fluke. Yeah.
It's
So,
nice to see again attention off the BBC, though. I think the fact that
oh,
Commodore's getting more mainstream attention again now is awesome.
yeah,
Straight up, yeah.
Mm.
All that was old is new again.
Yeah.
indeed. That's a good way of putting it.
Mm.
Good way of putting it. But I can tell you now, I
Cycle
mean,
continues.
all the events that are taking place around the world now, particularly based around the Amiga, it's incredible. I mean, for example, um, I was at Gamescom in Cologne in Germany in August, and Gamescom, they have 320,000 people through there in 5 days. Now, a lot of them, of course, are not there for Commodore, but a lot of them are. Then, and in September, Dan and I went to Italy for the Passione Amiga Magazine Open Day, and we had a marvelous time there because it's where it was held was in Umbria, which is the centre for truffles and wine making and gorgeous food, and we were spoilt rotten.
We didn't take much convincing to go, did we?
No, it's very easy to do. Then, of course, we had the Amiga 38 event in Mönchengladbach in Germany in October, and then I was in Zurich in November. Um, the the Vintage Computer Society and the uh, Swiss the Amiga User Group in Switzerland combined event, and that was a fabulous 2 day event. It was, there was, I think it was 1,200 people there for 2 days. Fabulous. It's incredible how this machine from all those years ago still captures everybody's passion and heart. It's amazing.
It was crazy a couple of years ago. I remember when I think it was the first show I went to in Germany, the Amiga 36 it may have been actually, and they had like the local TV news crew just suddenly saw like all these like Amiga geeks kind of hanging out on the street like queuing to get into this building. And like I said, I think it was about 1,500 people went there over the weekend, and it attracted the attention of the local TV news, who sent cameras down to kind of cover it, like what's going on here. So yeah, it's just the amount of people who get at these events is insane.
And it's growing. It's
Yeah.
absolutely growing. But it's a nice thing to be. I mean, I would never have imagined, when I finished with Commodore, that 40 years later there'd be this amount of interest. And I mean, as a community, I think we're probably the biggest community of anything. If you collectively add up all of the places around the world who have these meetings and things like you guys in Toronto, they're all over the world. It's unbelievable. It really, really is.
I mean, it was a computer system that had more spirit to it than we had back in the day. I remember when I was in school and I upgraded from a 128 to a 386 SX PC running DOS 4. And at the time I was working for a used computer store here in Toronto. And as soon as I had the opportunity, one came in, I immediately grabbed an Amiga 2000 and didn't look back. I just couldn't deal with DOS and its flakiness at the time.
Yeah, DMA conflicts and IRQ addresses. Yeah, it wasn't a
yeah.
fun time to use a PC. Definitely the Amiga was better.
No doubt.
Still is.
Yeah.
This may be a wait for the wonderful question, but had Commodore, had you actually were able to get the funding to maintain Commodore, would you focus more on the Amiga or try to keep the 6502 systems going as well?
No, I was not a believer in the 65 at all.
Oh, okay.
I thought that was going backwards from a technical
Yeah.
point of view. So it definitely would have been Amiga. But again, the Amiga only had a limited lifetime because you can't keep progressing technology and being backwards compatible. It doesn't.
Yeah.
There comes a point in time when you just have to abandon the format.
Sooner or later, I mean, Apple made the same choice. They went 68,000 and then the PowerPC and then to Intel, now then to ARM, Apple Silicon.
Yeah, you have no option, but you have to move forward, and that was where this Project Ombre came in, which was such an amazing thing. Basically, I don't know if you know about it, but it was Dr. Ed Hepler has been developing it for Commodore for about 18 months. And what he'd got an HP RISC-based core to which he added a 3D rendering engine, a blitter chip, chunky planar, and 5.1 surround sound stereo, which is state of the art in 94, 95. I mean, and he cobbled it together in software to show me what it would do, and it was absolutely mind blowing. So that would have been our next project, of course, would have been moving to Ombre.
That would have scared crap out of some people. Pardon my language.
Yeah,
At the time, was there a big difference in pricing for a 6502 chip and a 68,000? Were they comparable in price to purchase in quantity?
I'm not 100% sure that I can answer that, but I believe that the 6502 was a lot cheaper.
Okay.
Well, because we produced it ourselves.
Right. Okay. Okay.
The 8000, you know, was
With MOS Technologies, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows what might have happened with Commodore and the 6502? Because as a chip manufacturing plant, they were pretty well set up. But I just don't think that. I mean, after Jack Jamil left the company, I mean, it's really ironic, in my opinion. Commodore's success with the Commodore 64 was the beginning of their downfall, because they actually sold. I mean, there's a lot of conjecture about how many 64s were sold worldwide. I know the actual figure because I did due diligence, and the actual figure was just under 27 million computers they sold 64s, but they didn't record a lot of the sales because they didn't want to pay the tax on it. Right? But anyway, what I'm saying is that you cannot make 27 million computers without funding. I mean, no matter who you are. So Jack Jamil had to get in external funding, and that's where Irving Guild came in. And once Irving Guild came in, and he took up 22% of the shares, and Jack ended up with 7% of the shares. The rest is history, as they say.
So it's just
Jack,
such a big, I'm sorry.
no, once Jack left, which was about March of '84, once he left, the boat had no steering.
So is it arguable that there is such a thing as being too successful?
Well, I think that's one for everybody to ponder about. But there is no doubt in my mind that when you suddenly need a huge amount of money and you haven't got it, you have to sell your soul to the devil. That's how I see it, anyway.
I kind of see the analogy with Jack leaving Commodore and like when Steve Jobs left Apple. Like they completely lost the direction. Yeah, like the heart was ripped out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. But to be honest with you, I honestly don't believe that Commodore ever had a business plan. They seemed to stumble from one crisis to the next, and they would produce products out of thin air that nobody ever asked for, and there was never a need for, and at a price point that nobody wanted. And the Plus 4 is a perfect example of that. That was in my opinion, that was somebody's wet dream. And
the Amiga 600 and
yeah, I know because I ended up selling the whole worldwide inventory of Plus 4s for £99 retail, including 10 cassette games. And we brought component parts from all over the world and made up, because I sold them all to one company, the whole lot. And it cost Commodore an absolute fortune because it was designed to sell it, I think originally it's $399, and we ended up selling for £99. So go figure.
You're losing money on each one.
Yeah, huge amount of money. And another example of that, of course, was that when in the UK we managed to keep the 64 sales going for about 2 years longer, really, than its sell-by date, because we were doing bundles and packages and things. But when we eventually knew that that was our last Christmas, I went to Mediani and said, right, I've got this socioeconomic group of people who can afford to pay £200, but they can't afford to pay £500 for an Amiga. Can we produce a low-cost Amiga that we can maybe sell for £249, but a very basic model that people can add to as they can afford it, to replace the 64, so that I therefore keep my socioeconomic group of people. And so the concept of the Amiga 300 came from that. And the idea was that it would be called the 300 because everybody would know that the 500 was a better machine than the 300. They changed it to the Amiga 600. It ended up costing more to make than the 500 did. And we killed the 500 sales. We killed the golden goose and brought something out which ended up killing our revenue generator. I mean, you couldn't think of anything worse. It was just ridiculous.
It was the first time I heard of a company discontinuing its like best-selling products in its peak.
Mind you, Intel did the same thing, didn't they? You know, Intel went through a period where it used to eat its own young. You know, it released a chip with a certain spec, and then just a few weeks later, they'd have an upgrade with better features for less money. And it went on and on and on and on. And people got so burned. People were buying chips like buying apples. After a few days, they go rotten, and you just throw them away. Crazy. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we come up to 10 to 9, I guess, in your no 10 to 3, 10 to 4 is your we're 10 to 9 here, yeah. So are there any more questions, or shall we go so Dan and I are going to have a pint of whiskey or something?
Might need it with my throat today.
Yes, I've got a question. David, this is RJ Michael. So,
hey, RJ.
Hey, so what's next for David Pleasance? What are you going to work on next?
I'm going to write a book about what would have happened if we had bought Commodore.
What if book? Nice.
Huh.
Yeah, because you know we were cheated out of the management buyout by Petro Tichenko and ESCOM. But I'm now going to write what our plans were, how we plan to take Commodore forward and Amiga forward, and Ombre and so on and so forth. And with the hindsight of nearly 40 years of new technologies, we would have collaborated with all those people who were trying to develop new products based around the Amiga, because collaboration is the name of the game, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I don't know if you know, but Commodore almost closed GVP down. Instead of sort of collaborating and working with them, they bought them. They almost closed them down. And I mean, the most ridiculous thing you can imagine, isn't it? We never collaborated with people who made some of the best third-party peripherals for our machines. It was just nonsense, really. And in the same way that Commodore never spoke to Microsoft or any of the major business software houses to try to work with them, they didn't want to do so. So anyway, that in answer to your question, RJ, mate, that's what I want to do. So I'm going to write a new book. What could have been, what should have been.
Is that the one with Dave Haney as well, helping you with that?
Yes, yeah, Dave's involved in that. Yeah, he's. I think it'll be an interesting book.
Any more questions?
It's been nice to hear from you, RJ.
I'm sorry, what, David?
Hello?
I missed what you said, David.
I said it's nice to hear from you, RJ.
Well, we just saw each other just a few months ago in Germany.
Yeah, we did, indeed.
That was lovely.
But what a great show that was.
Indeed. Too bad you're not here. I was hoping I'd get to bump into you here again at World of Commodore. I understand you're a big star around this show.
I don't know about that. I was there last year, and it was I had a wonderful time, and really thoroughly enjoyed it. I just think that there's not as much money around this year as there was last year. And, you know, it's a matter of cost, isn't it? These things, it's not cheap to fly from the UK to Toronto.
We've got some snow here today, though, so we've got a bit of a taste of Toronto.
It is a great day here. This is well, gentlemen, we hope to speak with you guys soon again.
Yeah, thank you.
Us.
Thanks for inviting us, Ennio. It's a great pleasure.
Always happy. I'm sorry, Yannicka, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Just one last question, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much. Will there be any plans for any documentaries by any chance at any time in the future?
You, David, any documentaries?
There is one. Early last year, an Italian company, his name eludes me at the moment, filmed me in the Cambridge Centre for Computing History. We did quite a long documentary, and it's part of a series which they're actually going to be releasing sometime in January. I'm not sure when, but yeah, that should be coming out fairly soon. They promised to let me know the dates that it's going to be released. So I know that's happening, and I also think that Anthony and Nicola Caulfield are doing a new one.
Yeah, about the Amiga 500, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, they're good. They did From Bedrooms to Billions. I don't know if you've seen that one. And I believe that they're doing this the story of the Amiga 500.
They're very, very good, aren't they?
No, they're very good.
Yeah.
And I've just recently written my part of a book, which is being produced by a German publisher, although it's produced in English. The story of the battle between the Commodore Amiga 500 and the Atari 520 ST. And there was a big battle, particularly in the UK, which of course we won. And well, I love saying that because we won. Yeah, they've written a book all about that. It's specifically about the battle between the two products, and I input quite a lot into that, which is it's rather nice. So there's a lot happening at the moment. It's unbelievable, really. As you said, what was old is new again.
Bright blessings to you all for the merry season and onward.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you guys very much for having us. It's been a real pleasure. Wish I was there with you, and Dan does as well, because I told him how good it was. Maybe
I'd love to make it up.
Maybe next year we can do it and be there again. But I'm really pleased that RJ's there, because he's the magic man.
It's always a party when RJ's in town.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, RJ wrote a chapter in my first book, and I treasure that, because his perspective on things was so different from everybody else's, but it was also absolutely true.
I'm not sure if I've told RJ this before, but yeah, because I narrated the audiobook for Commodore: The Inside Story, and my mother doesn't really know anything about Commodore or the Amiga, but I played her RJ's chapter that I narrated, and she said your chapter made her cry, RJ. So you touched her.
Really?
Yeah, she loved it.
Say hi for me, please.
I will.
Yeah. You're a legend, RJ. We love you to bits, man.
So, gentlemen, if you guys want to in case you guys want to stick around, our next speaker is in about 3 minutes, and it is Ranko Rodic, and his topic is exciting new mini-Amiga developments, the Amiga FPGA.
Oh, if you haven't seen this device yet, you got to stick around to see it. It's amazing.
Well, thank you for having us on, and enjoy the rest of your event.
Yay!
Thank you.
Yes,
See you later, guys.
See you soon. Take care, everybody. Love you a bit.
Stay well.
Bye.
Soon.